Morant with a running start. Elevates. Oh, it dunks. Oh, my goodness.
Tie game in overtime. Gasol will turn. His heave is good. Memphis on top. 7-10 remaining. Conley now with three. Count it. A 15-point lead for Memphis. And Blake Griffin gets into it on the floor with Randolph. Hard to tell if there are any punches being thrown under there, but Griffin took acceptance.
Adams going long. Morant. He hit it. John Morant, insanity.
You gotta be kidding me. Welcome to Grits and Grinds, a Memphis Grizzlies podcast. My name is Keith Parish. The Grizzlies had a somewhat eventful weekend on Friday night. They beat down the rival Timberwolves in a relatively comfortable win. Yes, I do elevate the Timberwolves to rival status because I define rival, for me personally, as a team I especially like beating. And I enjoy beating Karl Anthony Towns. I like watching him yell about foul calls. I like sending him home unhappy. So that was a big win for the Grizzlies. Of course, I don't like beating Kyle Anderson that much. It was the return of Kyle Anderson, but it was a fun game for the Grizzlies. It might have been my favorite Grizzlies win of the season. We had a big watch party in Nashville on Friday night. A lot of people came out. We kept the bar, Noble's Kitchen and Beer Hall open late because there were so many people there watching the Grizzlies. So that game was super fun. More on that in a second. Then we got a notable injury report for the Wizards game that was going to be on Sunday. We found out that Ja and Dez were both doubtful to play, but also Jaren Jackson Jr. got elevated from out to doubtful. And so the disappointment of finding out, Ja and Dez aren't going to play was a little bit overtaken by our excitement that just around the corner, Jaren will be here. Then, of course, the Grizzlies had to play that game on Sunday where Jaren did not play, and also Ja and Dez did not play. And the Grizzlies did not have enough offensive punch to take down a Wizards team that had been playing much better over the last week or so. And the shorthanded squad loses, only scores 92 points, which is a season low. So a lot to get to. Let's turn it back to that Timberwolves game, which was super fun. You had all-star heroic performances from Ja Morant. He had 28 points, 10 rebounds, 2 assists, and a couple of steals, including one on the final play when the game was decided. That just was really one of those, if you're a floor-slapping college coach talking about hustle to the final whistle, all that nonsense. But it was pretty cool to see him dive on the ground and pick up the ball at the end of the game to finish with style. Bane had it going on with 24 points. Another nice scoring night from Bane, had 5 assists, had his 29th straight game, making multiple three-pointers, now moves into 9th place all by himself all time. He can move into a tie for 7th, goes all the way up with a 3-way tie for 7th if he makes 2 or more threes in the next game he plays in. Dillon Brooks was excellent in the game against the Timberwolves, played great defense all game, scored 21 points, had a huge first quarter. His three-pointers weren't dropping. That's the only kind of blight on the game Brooks played on Friday. Also, if you didn't see it, there was an article on NBA.com about Dillon Brooks, a little interview with Dillon Brooks. It was really great. And in that article, the 2 big takeaways are, for me, one, he explicitly stated he wants to stay in Memphis forever. He talked about how he wanted to play for 10, 15 more years, and they said in Memphis, and he said, yes, I love what we're doing here. This is where I want to be. He also talked about how he gets fired up to play defense and how he prepares for games, saying that he watches tape of his opponent the whole day before, night before the game, and then the day of the game, he just starts thinking about how much he hates that guy. And it gets into his head that he hates him. And that apparently is the process for Dillon Brooks to play how he plays. An interesting thing about this Timberwolves game. So you got good performances from your big three, Ja, Dez, and Dylan. You're now 6-1 on the season when all three of those guys play. The only loss is the 3-point loss to the Celtics on the second night of a back-to-back. You got good games from your main guys. You also had good supporting contributions from Aldama and from Steven Adams. You got off to a big start. The offense was flowing freely in the first half. The Grizzlies scored 72 points in the first half. That's their highest scoring first half of the season. In the second half, things slowed down. In the second half, the three-pointers did not go in. One of the reasons I thought this was maybe my favorite win of the year was because the Grizzlies didn't make three-pointers, yet still won going away. The Grizzlies only made 7 threes, yet won by 11. They didn't have a single game all of last year where they won by double digits if they failed to hit 8 three-pointers. Like, I've been kind of not doing like the sky is falling routine, but looking at the Grizzlies 3-point numbers, like these are going to come down. I don't think they're going to shoot this high for the whole season. So to see a game where the shots weren't going in, but you still get into your offense quickly, you're still scoring a lot of points, I found that very, very encouraging. Of course, because you scored 72 in the first half, that means, simple math, you only scored 42 in the second half, which is not great. But for this game not to be close, like the Timberwolves did not make it that tight of a game down the stretch. The Grizzlies only scored 42 points, yet still maintained that distance between them and the T-Wolves, and that's all defense. And the Grizzlies' defense keeps performing at a very high level. The defense played really well on Sunday against the Wizards. The Wizards hit 19 three-pointers, which is by far the most three-pointers they've made in a game this year. The Wizards have only made more than 12 three-pointers in a game twice this season. They had one game with 16, and this game on Sunday against the Grizzlies, they hit 19. Despite making 19 three-pointers, despite the Grizzlies being extremely shorthanded, the Grizzlies only allowed 102 points. I find that encouraging. There aren't a lot of takeaways, honestly, from the Wizards game, but the Timberwolves game, I thought there were. You saw your full-strength squad playing very, very well against a highly motivated Timberwolves team. This Timberwolves team literally had their backs against the wall. They had gotten off to a very bad start to the season. On paper, their schedule looked very, very easy, and they are not performing well against that schedule. Their starting lineup with Rudy Gobert hadn't been performing very well. D'Angelo Russell's having a very tough year. He had a huge breakout game on Sunday. Thankfully, he didn't have his breakout game against the Grizzlies on Friday. But you're playing a very motivated opponent. You have that history of the team you faced in the first round of the playoffs last year. A team which gave you a lot of trouble in the playoffs last year. And then a team that made the offseason push to get Rudy Gobert. They traded all of these draft assets to try to be good right now. And to face that team on your home court on national TV and to not have your best shooting performance, technically to have one of your worst shooting performances of the year as far as the three-point shots, and to still win by 11, I'm golden. That makes me super happy. Brandon Clark in this game made all 6 of his field goal attempts. The Timberwolves must hate seeing Brandon Clark play. There was a thing that said that, they were talking about how they needed to get Rudy Gobert so they didn't get hammered on rebounding and they could keep their opponent off of the offensive glass. And I read between the lines, they're talking about Brandon Clark. They're talking about Brandon Clark averaging 16.5 points and 9 rebounds per game in the playoffs. They're talking about all those second chance points the Grizzlies got against them in the playoffs. That's why they made this kind of panic move. It feels like a panic move. You have a young superstar in Anthony Edwards. By the way, Anthony Edwards, that guy's awesome. He had a huge playoff series, as you remember, and was in that same form against the Grizzlies on Friday night. But the Timberwolves went and got Gobert, and one of the reasons possibly was to just shut down Brandon Clark, is the way I'm reading it. And yet Brandon Clark goes 6 for 6, gets 15 points, and the Grizzlies crush the Timberwolves on the second chance points. Crush them on the offensive glass. The Grizzlies had a season-high 32 second chance points. By the way, the perfect field goal game for Brandon Clark, 6 for 6 from the field. That is the 6th game of his career. where he's attempted at least 6 field goals and made all of them. That is the most such games in Grizzlies franchise history. Tony Allen has the second most games of at least 6 field goal attempts and making all of the attempts. He has 3 of those games. And honestly, truthfully, I enjoyed Kyle Anderson having a pretty nice game. Kyle Anderson even got kind of a tough whistle. He had a travel called on him, but it wasn't a travel. He had he missed a layup where Dylan Brooks smacked his elbow from underneath. They didn't call a foul on that. But it was good to see Kyle have a good game. It was good to see Kyle interact with the teammates, like after the buzzer, going over and greeting all his friends and like being in the huddle. But then also as a professional, knowing he's not supposed to stay there. This is not his squad. So he went over and said his greetings, got some hugs, got some high fives, walked out. It was good to see Kyle Anderson. By the way, if you don't know, a little Kyle Anderson tribute. I'm sure I've said these numbers before. I'll say them again. Kyle Anderson is 18th all-time in Grizzlies franchise history in games played. Not many people have played more games as a Grizzly than Kyle. I mean, technically 17 have. His all-time franchise ranks for regular season stuff, he's 22nd in made three-pointers. You didn't think I'd start there, did you? 22nd in made three-pointers for Kyle Anderson. He's 25th in points, 16th all-time in rebounds, 15th in assists, 13th in steals, 12th in blocks. He's 3rd all-time in franchise history in defensive box plus minus. So Kyle Anderson, a big part of Grizzlies history. His name is ahead of a lot of guys that maybe people identify more with the Grizzlies, just because he played 4 full seasons, the 2 playoff appearances for the Grizzlies. So Kyle's a big part of the Grizzlies franchise history. It was great to see him and see him perform well, and also, of course, have the Grizzlies get the victory. Off the bench against the Timberwolves, outside of Brandon Clark, not a lot. Conchar and LaRavia combined to miss all 6 of their field goal attempts. Tyus Jones, 6 points and 3 assists. David Roddy played 6 minutes. I thought they were a good 6 minutes. He was part of a little 5-0 run where he had his hand involved in it, and he scored 5 points, made both of his field goal attempts. Now, these guys on the bench would get even more of an opportunity in Sunday's game against the Wizards. Grizzlies playing without Ja, without Desmond, of course, without Zaire, of course, without Jaren Jackson Jr. So you got to see a little bit more of the depth. I don't want to see that much of the depth. I mean, there's no mystery to this game why the Grizzlies lost. When you have the Wizards making 19 three-pointers and you yourselves make 9 three-pointers, so you lose the three-point battle by 30 points. But there were numerous lineups, many lineups in this game where your most lethal offensive option was Tyus Jones. You can't really have a 5-man lineup where Tyus Jones is your best scorer and expect to beat teams. There's probably some teams you can beat with an all low usage lineup, but the Wizards are not that team. The Wizards actually missed a lot of free throws. This should have been a little bit of a bigger margin of victory for them. They were 11 of 21 from the free throw line. Yeah, 4 of those were from Daniel Gafford, which is not that unusual. But this easily could have been a 15-point or more victory for the Wizards. But you give the Grizzlies credit that their defense did keep them in the game. Their defense kept this thing close. They even tied it up. I mean, they had a 9-point lead in the first half where the second unit was really clicking. A lot of great stuff. Aldama had a great game, honestly. He had a very, very strong first half, did most of his scoring in the first half. Aldama finished the game with 15 points, 7 rebounds, 3 blocks, and made 3 threes. Also 2 assists and a steal for good measure. A little bit of a homecoming for Santi as he played college basketball in Baltimore, but a great game from Santi, doing his best Jaren Jackson Jr. impression with those 3 3-pointers and 3 blocks, including one block where he wasn't looking at the defender, kind of jumped up backwards and hit it with his backhand. It was pretty cool. But like Aldama had a big game. Steven Adams was fine. I mean, maybe honestly good. I saw that Steven Adams' stats Twitter account was like he led the Grizzlies at offensive rating with a 101 offensive rating. That's a terrible offensive rating. I mean, thank you, Steve-O, for having the best individual offensive rating, which shouldn't be a thing, but still. The Grizzlies had their best offensive rating while Steven Adams was in the game, and that offensive rating was bad. So, not a lot of good stuff to take away. But there's not like huge takeaways from this game other than the Grizzlies' depth is not as good as it has been. And when Ja Morant and Desmond Bane don't play, you're probably going to be in trouble. The Grizzlies are now 0-2 when Ja doesn't play. They are not getting off to the good start like they did last year. Of course, last year they won 19 of their first 21 without Ja. Well, this year they're 0-2. They're also 0-2 when Desmond Bane does not play. Most notably, you can feel the absence of Desmond Bane with those three-point shooting numbers. The Grizzlies in the 2 games Desmond Bane hasn't played this year have combined to make 15 three-pointers. On average, in these 2 games, this is at Utah and at the Wizards on Sunday, there's 7.5 three-pointers made in those 2 games on 27 attempts per game. That's 27% from 3. When Desmond Bane doesn't play, this team does not have shooting. I'm not going to say I told you so, but it was apparent. We can see this, that they're not going to be able to score. Like Dillon Brooks tried, to pick up the slack. Dillon Brooks cannot pick up all the slack. A starting lineup of A starting lineup of Tyus Jones, Dillon Brooks with Konchar Adama and Steven Adams is not going to be able to score enough unless Dillon is on fire and Tyus Jones are on fire. Neither guy was on fire. It is hard for them to be primary offensive options. Tyus Jones is having a career-high scoring year as far as points per game. He scored 17 in this one, but it took him 18 field goal attempts to get there. Dillon Brooks struggled with the shot. He was 7 for 22 on his way to 19 points. It's too much heavy lifting. Like Konchar gave you 7 points in 36 minutes. This is coming off Konchar giving you 0 points in 22 minutes. I know he took 9 field goal attempts. He doesn't want to take that many field goal attempts. He's not a scorer. Briefly, earlier in the year, we had a couple of games where it's like, oh, Konchar stepping up that 3-point volume, giving us points when we need him to step up. That was an aberration. I think we can trust what we've seen over the previous few seasons. Konchar's a fine player, good depth piece, but he's a depth piece. If Konchar's starting, he's not going to be able to give you enough offense to beat okay teams. The Wizards are an okay team. Brooks, 7 for 22, keeps getting the shots up when Ja or Desmond aren't available. This is now 3 games this year that Dillon Brooks has played when either Ja or Des don't play. In those 3 games, he is attempting 19.3 field goal attempts per game. So 19.3 shot attempts per game for Dillon when Ja or Des or both miss. That's 3 games, 58 total field goal attempts. The good news is, so far this year when Ja and Des both play and Dillon plays, Dillon's only attempting 13 field goal attempts per game. That's good stuff. So Dillon is aware he's deferring in these games when you have a game like this and you're like, man, I wish Dillon could make more shots. Of course, we all do. But he's struggling because the defense can just focus on him. There's no other players who are going to hurt you. The team makes 9 out of 28 three-pointers. The other teams are not scared of the Grizzlies' three-point shooting. They can just collapse on everything and make it very difficult on the Grizzlies players who are trying to score. Because of that context of Dillon shooting a lot when Ja or Des are out, you now have this very clean and pretty stat. It is misleading, but it sounds nice, so I'll say it anyway. The Grizzlies are 6-0 when Dillon takes fewer than 15 field goal attempts. 1-4 when he attempts more than 15. But of course, that has less to do with Dillon shooting and more to do with Ja Morant and or Desmond Bane not playing. Steven Adams tried to keep the game competitive. And the Grizzlies tied this game up in the second half. I believe it was locked up at 68. The Grizzlies did everything they could. They have put in the defensive effort, like I've been saying. Over the last 2 weeks, Cleaning the Glass says the Grizzlies are 5th in defensive rating. So the Grizzlies have really turned up this defense. And they need to. And I think they knew they needed to. This is not like a game where you say there's no effort. The effort was there. Just the talent was not there. I don't say that to even criticize, really. This game is one of those games where we invest in our future. You give the opportunity. You let Kennedy Chandler play. He steps up and plays as a backup point guard. There are more Roddy and LaRavia minutes. Aldama, he flourished. I mean, Aldama in his second year had maybe the best game he's had all season. But like a really easy way to look at this, and this again speaks to the Grizzlies choosing to go the route of having less proven depth and giving your rookies more experience. But the Grizzlies had 2 or more rookies on the court for 26 minutes of this game. So over half of the minutes the Grizzlies played in this game, they had 2 or more rookies. They had some 3 rookie lineups. I manually tabulated this up. The Grizzlies lost those minutes by 19. So they were +9 in the 22 minutes. They played 1 or fewer rookies, and then -19 in the 26 minutes where they had 2 or more rookies on the court. I mean, LaRavia made some good defensive plays. He had a pair of back-to-back great plays in this one on defense, but after the first nice play, he threw the ball away, and after the second, he airballed a three-pointer. It's going to be trick or treat with the rookies. Like Kennedy Chandler, he made his first three-pointer of the season. He airballed a heat check three-pointer on the next possession. So it's going to be a little painful when you play the rookies this much, when you have to depend on your deeper bench lineups. But we are hoping, we are crossing our fingers. We're pretty close to being done with this. Yes, the Grizzlies are still probably going to load manage. I know these were injuries to Ja and Desmond. But Pete Pranica called them minor injuries on the broadcast. Not having any official knowledge, it feels like more of a load management thing. You get a little banged up, take the night off. This is what good teams do. The Grizzlies are a good team. We know they are elite when their top line guys play. We knew that coming in. The Grizzlies' top 8 returning from last year, or the top 8 guys in minutes returning from last year, when they played together, they were great last year, and we assume they'd be great this year. And Desmond has taken this leap. The Grizzlies are great when they play healthy. They're going to struggle when some guys miss. But Jaren, will he play on Tuesday night? They play the Pelicans at the Pelicans. National TV on TNT. They play a home game against the Thunder on Friday. You got to think Jaren is coming back in one of those games. The Grizzlies' history over the past few seasons when someone returns from injury is they go from doubtful to questionable, and normally when they're questionable, that means they play. Since there are 2 days off after Tuesday's game, maybe they'll give Jaren 5 more days to heal up. That would make sense to me. As long as Ja and Dez are good to go against the Pelicans on Tuesday, maybe that'll be enough for the Grizzlies. The Grizzlies do have the specific matchup issues against the Pelicans. Who is going to slow down Zion Williamson? Who is going to slow down Brandon Ingram? It's not a good matchup for the Grizzlies. But it's just one game. It doesn't really matter. We're looking at the big picture, the big season, bringing back Jaren, and it is very, very close. Let's take a quick break, and then we'll have a little short section at the end where I'm going to go through some of the front court pairings so far this year and how well they have performed, and then how well they will operate once Jaren gets back and what those rotations might look like. We'll do that right after this break. Don't miss Grammy Award winner and 15-time American Music Award winner Reba as she returns to the FedEx Forum with her Reba Live in Concert Tour on Thursday, November 17th with special guest Terry Clark. Tickets are on sale now at Ticketmaster.com or at the FedEx Forum box office. All right, now that we're 14 games into the season, we have a little bit more data. Obviously, we're getting Jaren Jackson Jr. back, so I thought I would just kind of dig a little deeper into how the front court pairings have gone so far this year. What I wanted to look at mainly was just your basic lineup data, your net rating, and then how they were defending, how these lineups defended and rebounded when these specific players were on the court. Like the Grizzlies have been starting Santi Aldama and Steven Adams, and the Grizzlies starting lineup has performed very, very well this season. When Aldama and Adams are on the court together, and of course most of these minutes are with Desmond and Ja, so maybe they're a little bit inflated, and it's not fair to the other pairings. But the Grizzlies are plus 13.4 points per 100 possessions. These numbers are all going to be from cleaning the glass, which filters out the garbage time. And notably, when these guys are on the court, Aldama and Adams, so far this year, the Grizzlies have a 104 defensive rating, which is very, very good. They're also incredibly good at offensive rebounding. They're the 99th percentile for offensive rebounding. The Grizzlies are still a very good offensive rebounding team this year. They are pretty good in the 74th percentile in defensive rebounding, or keeping your opponent off the offensive glass. That has been a big issue for the Grizzlies this year, keeping their opponent off the offensive glass. Statistically, hasn't been as much of a problem when Santi Aldama and Steven Adams are on the court. Now, I thought this was interesting. When Steven Adams functions as the only big, I've been saying I don't like the lineups with Brandon Clark as the only big. Like, if Steven Adams is out there and Santi Aldama, Brandon Clark, and Xavier Tillman are off the court, we have 201 possessions of this, which is an okay sample size. I mean, it's going to get bigger. It's not the largest. The Grizzlies are plus 2.4 points per 100 possessions, so much worse. They have a terrible defensive rating, a 123 defensive rating this season when Steven Adams is the only big on the court. Now, that is leaving a lot of different players who can be the power forward there. Like some of these lineups, you would say it's LaRavie at the 4. Some of them it's like, all right, it's Conchar or Roddy. Probably Roddy because his arms and shoulders are bigger. Like there's some weird lineups in here. But Steven Adams with Aldama, Clark, and Tillman off the court, the team has a 123 defensive rating. Offensive rebounds incredibly well, but the defensive rebounding is bad in the 4th percentile. So they're getting crushed on the offensive glass, which is why you would assume, you connect the dots, that's why the defensive rating is so bad, because you're giving up offensive rebounds and the other team is scoring that way. So Aldama and Adams has been really, really good. Defense has been really, really good. Adams by himself, defense bad. Then Adams and Brandon Clark. I don't remember off the top of my head these guys actually playing together this season, but they've played 25 possessions together. That sample size is so small, it's meaningless, but the numbers are nightmarish for the Adams and Clark minutes. Basically, they've played 25 possessions and they got outscored by 13. So it could just be a random run, and that's why you have these inflated bad numbers. Aldama and Clark. Okay, we have 234 possessions of Aldama and Clark playing together. I like this combination. So far, they're plus 9.9 points better than their opponent over 100 possessions, per 100 possessions. Aldama and Clark being plus 9.9, where you think they actually do play a lot of their minutes with second unit guys, I think that's very promising, very encouraging. I think this is, of course, the second unit front court of the near future once Jaren returns. When Aldama and Clark are on the court together, they have a 108 defensive rating. They do not offensive rebound very well. Steven Adams is the key to our offensive rebounding. They're in the 24th percentile for offensive rebounds, but a respectable 69th percentile in defensive rebounding. So they're keeping the opponent off the offensive glass relatively well. By the way, when Conchar is the 3 with Aldama and Clark as your 4 and 5, the Grizzlies are collecting 87% of defensive rebounds, which is incredible. They're only allowing the other team to get 13% offensive rebounds, which is great. That number is unsustainable, but Conchar's a good rebounder. It makes sense. Conchar, Aldama, and Clark as a front court can rebound pretty well. When Brandon Clark, now when he operates as the only big, 235 possessions. This is Brandon Clark playing without Steven Adams, Santi Aldama, or Xavier Tillman on the court. The Grizzlies are slightly negative, minus 3.7 net rating, a not good, what we'd call the slightly bad defensive rating of 116, 21st percentile in offensive rebounds, and then 26th percentile in defensive rebounds. That says everything to me. Brandon Clark is the only big. They cannot collect rebounds. Both games against the Wizards this year, we've had some of these moments, and Daniel Gafford looks amazing against the Grizzlies. When the Grizzlies actually cut this game, I believe they tied the game. Conchar finally pushed the pace, got a layup in transition, tied the game, and then they come down, and Daniel Gafford gets an offensive rebound and one, and the Grizzlies never really recover after that. But Brandon Clark is the only big. The Grizzlies are slightly negative this year with a bad defensive rating and terrible rebounding numbers. Aldama and Clark together, very promising. Not good at offensive rebounding, but good at defensive rebounding. Adams is the only big. They're not stopping people because they can't get anybody off the glass. No one will help poor Steven Adams on the rebounding. And then Aldama and Adams has worked very, very well so far this year. Of course, we have to consider the number of minutes those are playing with, the good defensive rating and offensive rating guys in Desmond Bane and Dylan Brooks. And that's why those numbers are probably like that. But I was interested in these things, so I looked them up and then, of course, thought I would share them with you. Anyways, that is the episode for today. I appreciate you spending your Mondays with me. Hope you're having a great one. Remember to watch the Grizzlies. They're on TNT on Tuesday, an early game at 6:30 Central, and then, of course, a home game on Friday against the Thunder. Please, Jaren, at the very least, play in that one. Talk to you guys soon. Thanks for listening. Go Grizz.